And this is a supercar.
So it was the supercar of its day. It totally was. It was the McLaren of the 1920s, early 1920s.
Yes.
And you've got to remember, Bentley built the finest cars in England at the time. They were reliable, they were fast, they were pretty simple.
Yeah. I will do anything for this car. I would never want, I would make it work to somehow acquire this car because
I think you deserve it.
I don't think I deserve it.
Putting a little word in there.
But it's a car that I would.
You're a great ambassador for the Bentley brand. You really are.
We're here in our 1922 Bentley 3-liter, and we're with Mr. Nick Waller, the Executive Director of the Audrain Concours Motor Week. You know, we were doing some driving videos this week, and you were going to be joining us, so...
It's great fun. This, to me, this is my happy moment, I've got to tell you.
When we found out we were driving with you, this is slowly, I don't even want to say slowly, but this has become probably my favorite car in the collection. You know, we had it in St. Moritz. We drove it through
wasn't that great?
We drove it through the Swiss Alps. I've driven it all around there, and then, of course, we had it in California for Jay's. But when we were driving with you, I figured, how can we not drive the Bentleys? This is your bread and butter.
This is my bread and butter, as you said. The Bentley, to me, I've grown up with Bentleys all my life. My parents were involved with the Bentley Drivers Club. So somewhere on my body I must have Bentley wings tattooed, I'm sure. So this 3-liter, I think, is one of the nicest Bentleys because it's got great history, really.
Right.
It's links to the very first, the early days of the WO series Bentleys that were built in Cricklewood in London. It's a 1922. Bentley only started in 1919.
Yeah.
The first 3-liter engine was fired up in the Muse factory, which was above a sort of Muse garage in London.
Wow. Yeah.
It was only in 1919, and the whole history of Bentley began then. So, interestingly, Bentley really only built the chassis and the engine, as we all know, and then they would go off and be bodied at various coach builders in England. This car really, I think, to me, is a very important car in Bentley history because it was bodied by Park Ward in London. It's 20 chassis numbers away from the first car to race at Le Mans, chassis 141, bodied by Park Ward, very similar looking. And Le Mans was very important to Bentley throughout the 1920s. You've also got to remember the Brooklands track, the Brooklands circuit, which was built in 1907, but Bentley ran most of their cars. I think a lot of their cars were tested at Brooklands, which was in South London, whereas the factory was in North London in Cricklewood. But they would take their cars down to Brooklands, which was the first purpose-built oval track in the world, before any track anywhere else. And it was a real test of endurance and for speed. And if you won at Brooklands, again, you made your name. The Bentley Boys, which was this kind of club, would race at Brooklands. They'd go back into London, they'd drink it up, they'd celebrate. And there was this club that if you were a Bentley driver, you aspired to be part of the Bentley Boys. And I think that's really what I find so fascinating and so exciting to be a Bentley owner at that time. And you've got to remember, Bentley built the finest cars in England at the time. They were reliable, they were fast, they were pretty simple.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, you know, the car, 1922, it's 2024 now.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of cars in our collection, and this is one, you know, we run them all, but this is one I know with just the little bit of, it could sit for a year, and you know, you tickle the carbs a little bit, you turn the fuel on, It'll fire right up.
That's really what made Bentley's name, and that's why they became so popular. Not only did they have the speed and the history and the race prestige, they had that reliability. You could go and drive it. And it's not just open sporting touring cars like this. They built the saloons. There were cars for to be chauffeur driven. They were very stylish.
Yeah. Well, and even today, I think you see, especially with the owners of, you know, the pre-Derby Bentleys.
Yeah.
You know, they really use their cars.
Yes.
They ship them across the world. They drive them.
Yep.
You know, they drive them. You know, when we were at the ICE event, William Metcalf, who operates Vintage Bentley, drove his Bentley all the way from his shop in, I don't know where.
He's just outside London. He's south of London.
Just outside London, all the way to St. Moritz.
What a hero!
In the winter,
on his own.
On his own.
Unbelievable.
So, I think
that's how good Bentleys can be. And once Bentleys are in your blood, you're addicted.
Oh, and that's what's happened to me.
And with you.
Yeah, I mean, this
is captivated.
You know, and everybody who's, you know, watched me or watched the channel knows I love Porsches. You know, anything from the vintage to modern Porsche.
Yeah.
But there's something about this car. And I think that the era of car, right, where once you figure it out, once you kind of understand how it drives, it's almost like a living being, and
you become part of it.
You become part of it, and this car, you know, brings you back. I always try to imagine like we're on Ocean Avenue, or we're on Bellevue Avenue right now, driving by the Gilded Age houses. You know, this car would have been here in period. And
this car suits Newport down to a T.
Exactly.
With Newport's racing heritage, with the Vanderbilt Cup and all of that, all of the mansions, all of the owners of beautiful houses in Newport, this would have been, I can absolutely feel us back in that era.
Right.
Not so much going past the roadworks, but, you know, look at where we are. Right. This is history. Living history.
And, you know, we have, you know, a number of cars from this period, pre-war cars, what have you, but it's a 4-speed. The shifter's right on your right side, like it would be if you're driving, you know, on the left-hand side.
Which is unusual. For the time, exactly where it was.
Exactly.
And sometimes it was outside. It was outside the body.
It's very familiar for us driving it. Exactly. What does take a little getting used to is the accelerators in between the brake and the clutch. So
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, the brake.
Are you kind of intuitively in it now?
No problem.
You don't even have to think about it.
Yeah, because it actually makes sense, and I understand, you know, I don't know if this is why they did it, but when you're shifting or when you're downshifting or when you're upshifting, you have to blip the throttle.
That's exactly
and it's much easier to do when with how your foot is going to be positioned.
That's exactly where it was.
So for shifting and driving this car, it makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't, you know, you drive it, if you haven't driven it for a little while, you kind of, you know, your feet will naturally do one thing, but you pick it up right away.
Well, of course, you're driving on the right side of the car.
Exactly.
The correct side of the car.
Correct.
The correct side.
Okay.
So tell me how because you drove this on the ice, or at the ice again.
Yes.
Sadly, we couldn't get it on the lake, which was...
But it ended up being okay.
It did. And you had the most wonderful drives in the snow.
So yeah, I mean, now, you know, the first time I really experienced driving this car, you know, actually putting miles on it and going on extended drives was in Switzerland in February.
Yeah.
So that was really, you know, we had Evan and I sorted it. You could see it in our St. Moritz video. We'll link it below. But we purchased this car at the Audrain Concours in 2023 at the Bonhams auction. And then from there, it went right to our good friend Evan and I's shop to prepare it for the ICE event in February. So really, I only drove it maybe once around the building in Newport before it was sent over to Switzerland. So,
and it was love at first sight.
Oh yeah, and then you know what ended up happening was, if you watch our video, you know, we ended up getting quite a bit of snow and we were unable to go on the lake. But some of the organizers and enthusiasts decided to go for a drive through the Swiss Alps, and we actually ended up driving, I would probably say, over 150 miles in the Alps, up to 14,000 above sea level. And and this was by far the oldest car. We were with a Ferrari, with Fritz's Delage, that won our Concours. His Ferrari, I can't remember the model of Ferrari, but it was from the 50s. So this car was really 20 to 30 years older than everything else driving, and I had no issues keeping up, going up in altitude. And that was one of the best experiences I could say I've ever had.
I'm so happy. And I do remember, you arrived about the day before I think I flew in, and I remember seeing you. I came to the garage, and you were sitting there screwing all the studs into the tires in preparation for what we hoped was going to be this wonderful day. I'd love to take us back there though.
So for me, I mean, that's kind of what solidified it for me, was that drive and just how impressive this car was. How much power it has,
Well, you were saying earlier how torquey it is. That's really a great asset to have, especially when the gears are slightly, what's the word? Let's say they are a challenge.
Well, I mean, like anything else, it takes getting used to, but you'll end up grinding here and there. I mean, no one's the best. As much as you would like to think you're the best driver in the world, you're going to end up grinding gears a little bit. It's just part of the thing, but you figure it out.
Well, I'll take you back, and I was thinking about this. I was born closer to this car in 1922. I know I look really young, but I'm not. I was born closer to this car than to a modern supercar of today.
Oh, is that right? And this is a supercar.
So it was the supercar of its day. It totally was. It was the McLaren of the 1920s, early 1920s. And when I was at school, my parents had these Bentleys, as I said. And I used to be taken to my primary school in the morning. I can remember my mother driving our 4.5. I'd be sitting in the back.
What a great memory.
And that's what it is. And that's where you get hooked.
Well, and the thing too is, a lot of the cars of this period weren't necessarily designed, I don't want to say for driver comfort, but this car, it's so comfortable. But the driving position is perfect. I would have no issue driving this cross country in some sort of rally, some sort of event.
You could do Le Mans 24 hours.
I would have the top. We have a top that comes right up. The windshield wiper works, as you can see on film, which we used in St. Moritz. Just everything about the car. And my favorite thing too, of course it's the original motor, original transmission. But the car it's not a over restored. It's not a it's not a perfect car.
It's a driver.
It's a car that's meant to be driven.
Absolutely. I mean, I love fully restored cars. I'm all about the restoration and Concours and all of that. But if this was a perfect example that was just out of restoration, you'd be worried about driving it.
That's exactly right. I have no problem. This is a car, rain, snow, salt, mud. I want to bring it everywhere we go. And this is a car that there's a handful of cars, I tell Nick, our chairman, that if he ever decides to part ways with for any reason, which won't happen, but if any happens, I will do anything for this car. I would never want. I would make it work to somehow acquire this car because
I think you deserve it.
I don't think I deserve it.
Putting a word in there.
But it's a car that I would.
You're a great ambassador for the Bentley brand. You really are. You're an honorary Bentley boy, Sean.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's funny how that happens because people often ask. We're very privileged in the situation that we're in. Prior to me being here, I never really had any exposure to cars of this era.
Yes. How does this compare to a Tesla?
Oh yeah. And you know, I always, like many kids, you know, you are of what you grow up with, and you know, Ferraris, Porsches, supercars. I think that's a first love for many, and to me now that I've been exposed to cars like this, and there's no comparison. I would never, you know, if I was offered a Bugatti, the most modern Bugatti, or this, it wouldn't even be a question to me. I would take this every single day.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I think that's a great choice. I really do. I mean, you can do so much with vintage Bentleys. There's so many events that you can do on. There's a tour probably for a vintage Bentley in any part of the world that you can take part in. And that's what they are all about. If you go on a Bentley Drivers Club tour or a vintage tour, they've got them in Australia or all over the UK or Europe. You're amongst friends, you can chat, you can talk about your experience during the day. I love all that.
Yeah. And it's funny you say Australia, because this car pretty much lived its entire life in Australia.
Almost entire life. It went off, I think, in what, 1924? I think it went to Australia.
Yeah, early.
Very early.
And then it lived there.
Yeah.
I think until we bought it, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think it was very newly back to when it came to the United States.
Yeah.
I think it may have stopped in the UK. I can't remember. But when was it up racing? Because now it's got four-wheel brakes. When it was first built in 1922, it just had rear brakes.
And how was that? Was it very? I mean, have you driven a car with just rear brakes?
Yeah, and it's again, you really have to think ahead.
Yeah.
Four-wheel braking was introduced, I think, in 1924 because it was very much needed. And it was probably developed for racing as well.
And now, was that something that at the time Bentley would have reached out to, or was that something you would have had the car in for whatever it may have been?
Very much. People would, as they developed the 3 litre and then the later 4.5, they would, if something came up that was new and it added to the performance or to the experience, you can very often go back to the factory, and you can, all of the factory records, a lot of them exist, and you can check your chassis number. There are books, I have a number of books where you can check a chassis number's history from the coach builder back to the factory where it perhaps had four-wheel brakes. This also has the Supersport, the twin carburetors fitted.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that is right.
Yeah. It was first born with the single carb, which was fine, but for that added perkiness, shall we say? Added power. It had twin carbs. And they're also the slopers, where they slope over at 45 degrees, just so you didn't have to impede the bonnet. And all of these things would have been added during its life. And in period, that's great. This has the original body too. I know it's being restored, but it has most of its original panels.
So obviously we brought ours to the ICE event, this being a 3 liter. You know, I'm starting to learn a lot about this, what you could say is the best era of Bentley, in my opinion.
I would agree. Between 1922, 1923 and 1930, when the blowers Bentleys started to come in, of which they built 50 factory-built original blower Bentleys. This is the supercharged 4.5 that was introduced. The first one was built by Tim Birkin, who was one of the famous Bentley boys who raced for Bentley at Le Mans.
So at shows like Pebble or Concours, what is the cream of the crop Bentley?
Well, it changes. It changes. I mean, the blower Bentley, the 4.5 supercharged, always command probably the bigger money, because there weren't that many, but I think all of them still exist in some form or another. They are always a prize collector, and you know, most of the big collections have a blower Bentley. But after that, what is interesting is, I think the world has changed in the last 10 years, and original coachwork is now much sought after. Whether that's an open tourer like this, or whether it's Starting
Get a little speed.
I can hear it. Original coachwork now is much sought after, and that can take any form. The closed saloons, the two-seat doctor's coupes, the four-seat limousines. All, if you have original coachwork, that's what's so important, because a lot of the closed bodies in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they were falling into disrepair, and a lot of them were thrown away, and people wanted to have a Van der Pla open touring body put on, and many were built back in the 60s and 70s, and they're still around. They're great cars. But you know, I think nowadays, I think if you have original coachwork, you would hang on to it now, just whatever the style.
Right.
That's what people want.
Well, Mr. Waller, I appreciate you joining on this. Probably shouldn't shake hands and drive, but we're going to do it.
Hands on the wheel.
I appreciate you joining us on this beautiful drive, educating me a little bit on Bentleys. I'm going to have to read some of those books. And
it's my pleasure. I will lend you the books, but I want them back. To me, as I said, Bentley's part of my life, and this has been such a beautiful day to do this drive. It's made my day, it's made my week, it's made my month. You're an official Bentley boy now.
I appreciate that. And if you like these videos, please like us, subscribe to our channel. We have many exciting videos come out, more with Mr. Waller as well. So we will see you soon. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good driving with you, Sean.